Alright, part 2 of the very fascinating Bloomberg Mac rumor drop talks about there being two separate Mac Pros in development, one with Apple Silicon and one with Intel processors. So I can't think of another time in history Apple planned on having two separate Mac Pros available for people to buy, so I guess Satan better be putting on a jacket because it's looking cold at his place today. Let's begin. So yeah, we have talked about the Apple Silicon Mac Pro before, but this is the first time we're getting confirmation, for one, from Bloomberg, and also that Apple plans on developing an Intel Mac Pro and an Apple Silicon Mac Pro simultaneously, and perhaps even have them both on the market at the same time. Now, the report doesn't explicitly say that we should expect them this year, so Tim Cook did say that he expects the transition to Apple Silicon to take 2 years. That was at WWDC last year, meaning that by WWDC next year, there shouldn't be any Intel Macs left, and in Apple's last big transition from PowerPC to Intel, they did not even take the full 2 years. So sometimes these transitions can go a bit faster than people think, but my prediction here is that since the Apple Silicon Mac Pro is rumored to be much smaller and kind of design reminiscent of the Power Mac G4 Cube, which is a interesting throwback that they referenced in this report, I think there's a good chance that the reason Apple is considering having two separate Mac Pros available is because one is going to be built around power efficiency and all the great Apple Silicon performance gains, and the other one is probably going to be sticking around for a little bit longer for the sake of upgradability and the fact that you can take it apart and customize it the way you want to. You know, it's not a huge surprise to us to find out that the, $40,000, $50,000 Mac Pro is going to be the thing that ends up being the last Mac to switch away from Intel. I think most of us were anticipating that, but I've always felt like in the back of my head there was a decent chance when Apple switched to their own silicon that version of the Mac Pro, as small as it may be and as cool as the design may be, it would not be as upgradable, it would not be as modular as the cheese grater Mac Pro we got just last year. It was technically launched in December of 2019, so it wasn't really last year, but it was close to a year ago. And the hilarious part about it to me is so many people were considering the iMac Pro a trap when it came out in 2017. People were like, I don't think you should get that iMac Pro because they're probably just holding over the Pros until the real Mac Pro drops, and that's going to be the real game changer. Then later to find out, oh, the Mac Pro starts at $6,000, maxes out at $50K, and the people who got it are just going to be kicking themselves in the rear a couple years later because Apple's going to put their own silicon in the Mac Pro, make it smaller, make it faster, probably way more power efficient while still providing some of those insane gains that the Intel 28-core processors can do, except for a fraction of the price. So in reality, the Mac Pro was the trap all along. And no, honestly, I don't believe that the Intel version of the Mac Pro that they plan on keeping around for the next few years, even with all of its size and all of its modular options and its afterburner card and all of the 28 cores you can stuff in it and all that RAM you can stuff in it, I still think that whatever this G4 Cube looking Mac Pro ends up being, with Apple Silicon inside, there's probably a decent chance you'll be able to spec it out to be just as fast, if not faster. It just simply won't be as modular, which some people will probably not like. Some people want a bigger tower, something that they can take apart and upgrade as they please, but Apple knows deep in their heart that that's probably not the future, and the future involves getting computers and microchips smaller and smaller and smaller, more power efficient, and basically Apple does not want to release a Mac Pro that ends up making their silicon look inferior to Intel's. And as soon as Apple can switch away from Intel, I think that's when we can actually see the return of reasonable Mac Pro pricing. The specs and performance you get out of those maxed out Mac Pros will probably be obtainable in like $6,000 to $10,000 Macs. They just won't be super modular and customizable, but you'll still have those great performance gains, unless of course maybe Bloomberg is reporting on a different Mac entirely. Something I've seen a lot of you guys suggest and bring up in the past. Why doesn't Apple have some kind of middle ground for the tower market? Okay, so some people don't want an iMac because they want to be able to use their own keyboard, mouse, and their own display and speakers and everything, but they still want to have a desktop setup, and the Mac Mini, it's just a little too weak for what they need, but the Mac Pro is a little too overkill. And in the past, I would say having some kind of tower of a Mac in between the two is a little redundant, but now, especially knowing that Apple Silicon and the Mac Mini is only rocking two USB USB-C ports, and that maxes out at around $2,000, and the Mac Pro starts at $6,000. I'm starting to agree. Yeah, I think there might be a little bit of room in the middle for something that's not quite as overkill as a Mac Pro, but not quite as dumbed down as a Mac Mini. So something healthy and powerful in the middle that can give you great specs, great performance for a reasonable price point, because all you have to do is provide the monitor, the keyboard, and mouse, and Apple just comes in with the awesome silicon. Maybe that's what Bloomberg is reporting on. Some kind of mid-tier step that's like, hey, want some more power than a Mac Mini, but you don't want to spend Mac Pro pricing? Maybe that's what this could end up being, especially when we include this other section of the report that Apple's apparently planning a lower cost, more budget-friendly external monitor. I was very happy to hear this because, for one, the Pro Display XDR was way too overkill for the market Apple typically serves, and I was really hoping they could have some type of successor to the Apple Thunderbolt display, which was a great MacBook accessory that Apple always demonstrated, like, hey, you can take your Mac on the go, and then when you come home, you can dock it with this Apple-branded monitor. Looked very clean, looked very modern, but never got updated, and I wish it would have. And the Pro Display XDR, some people consider it a bargain because of the great dynamic range and how it's competing with reference monitors that cost way more, but I feel like Apple's hard work and Apple's market should not just be attacking, you know, studios and businesses that are buying $40,000 reference monitors that hardly anyone actually uses, but instead making products that, you know, the everyday professional can use. That's kind of what MacBooks were going after, bringing high-class video editing software and high-class hardware to the everyday person. Pro Display XDR felt like it was kind of going away from that demographic Apple used to cater to. So I guess the reason I'm trying to not get too excited about Apple's own standalone monitor idea is to be cheaper than the Pro Display XDR still doesn't really mean affordable, okay? So I have very little hope that the Apple standalone monitor would be like $1,000. I think we'd be lucky if it ended up costing $2,000, to be honest with you, probably just taking the display panels they putting in the next generation iMacs and then just selling those separately. But they still probably will be expensive because they're going to be Apple hardware with some high-polished aluminum expensive manufacturing process. So if there is going to be a standalone monitor, you can still be pretty expensive and yet be cheaper than the Pro Display. Maybe all they're developing is a Pro Display XDR that doesn't need to use the Pro stand. I feel like they could save a lot of money by just axing that part of the process. But yeah, if it's just a standard LCD display, but it's still made by Apple and aluminum and everything, $2,000 to $2,500 would be my guess. But at the same time, I would not be entirely shocked if they're like, $3,000 because it's so thin and beautiful. And Apple's a luxury brand. We have to cater to that market. But also, here's an iPad for $200. Yeah, I don't get it either. It confuses me. But I'm excited to hear that they do plan on bringing a more affordable, more compact Mac to the lineup. Whether or not it's branded as a Mac Pro, I'm still not convinced on. But how about you guys? Would you be somewhat interested in getting a little Mac tower that's bigger than a Mini but smaller than a Pro, but has Apple Silicon inside and can obviously grant you amazing performance that we're probably going to see equal in the iMacs, but hopefully just a little bit cheaper, maybe somewhere between $2,000 and $5,000, depending on the RAM and storage you get and all that. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Feel free to let me know if you would buy something like that. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you guys in the next one.